Hey, welcome. So this tutorial is for how to do color work from a color work chart. This is kind of in support of my summertime tote bag pattern, which has a few different color work charts that you can knit off of. So basically, here's your standard color chart. You have columns here and row numbers here. So when you're knitting in the round from a color work chart, you're always going from right to left, which is a little counterintuitive for people who read English or other languages that normally go from left to right. But when you think about it, you're going from right to left, so it will mimic going across your live stitches. And essentially how it will work, so this is like a little cherry pattern that I made, just using like an online tool called Stitch Fiddle. You can, kind of like a little digital graph paper that's really fun to make pattern repeats for. So basically, it looks like it's upside down here because I am knitting top down. So when I turn mine right side up, it will look right side up to the eye. So that is the reason for that. Okay, so things to be aware of for knitting. So I did a folded hem, but that's not a part of the color work chart. That's just a plain color like these tote bags here. So now I am starting with my first color work row. So I will start with number 1 on the row here. So I see I have 3 white squares in a row. So that represents 3 white stitches. So I will take my working yarn here. I have a bunch of loose ends, sorry, because I switched yarn balls. So I'm just holding those for stability, but I will knit 3 white stitches. 1, 2, 3. And now I get to this light gray color. I don't have a color printer, but that's supposed to represent green for the green of a little cherry stem. So I have my green here. So there's something called color dominance in stranded Fair Isle knitting. It's basically whichever color you're holding above the other one pops out more from your knitting. And I'll try to Google some photos of examples of knitting the same color work chart, but holding one color dominant versus the other one dominant. In this pattern, I want the accent color to be the dominant color because I want it to feel like the cherries are kind of popping and are standing out from the background. So in this case, my white color is the background color. So I do two-handed Fair Isle knitting, in which case the dominant color is always held in the left hand and the non-dominant color is held in the right hand. Some people do Fair Isle knitting where they have it held in both hands, or sorry, they have this both colors held in one hand, in which case I believe the dominant color will be the one on top. So you'll always hold your two strands of yarn in the same orientation, and you'll always have your dominant color on top. So I will go back to what I'm comfortable with, which is the two-hand Fair Isle knitting. So I am knitting from this first row, and so I did 3 stitches in white, and so now I am bringing in my dominant color. I'm just gonna hold it in just hold the tail so that it has a little tension, but you don't have to do that after you've joined it. So I'll do the 2 stitches in green. Okay, so now I have, sorry, these tails are crazy. Okay, so now I have my 3 stitches in white, my 2 stitches in green. Now let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitches in white. So what happens when you don't have a color for a while, you'll see like I just did my first white stitch after these 2, and you can see that white yarn has to span the gap of those 2 green stitches because I wasn't using the yarn there, so it has to go across. So the farther the gap is, the farther the amount of yarn you'd need to span across the gap. So if you have a really big gap, usually I think anything over like 4 stitches, especially for a bulkier yarn, you might want even fewer. You want to do something called catching your floats, where you kind of pin this non-used yarn to the working like current color so that there isn't a big flappy gap basically of like a huge strand of yarn. And the reason that you don't want a huge strand of yarn is a few things. One, it can pull on things and cause uneven tension. It's really hard to get the exact tension right over that big of a span. So if you do too little, it'll bunch your fabric in the front. If you do too little, the stitches will look really loose. And then also, especially for a bag, I mean, I like to add a lining to, like a sewn lining to my tote bags. But if you don't have a lining, you can see here, these are all of the what are called floats that are the yarn carrying across the back. If you have a really, really big one, it would just catch on things. I think that's kind of tough, both for a bag or if this was like a sleeve for a sweater. You don't want to put your arms through the sleeve and have your fingers get caught in a million like 4-inch long floats. So that's the reason that you want to think about how far is the gap between the color that you're doing right now and the next time that you do it again. So this one is 7. So I'm going to do 3 and then catch my float and then keep going. So I'll show you how to catch the float with the non-dominant color. So how to catch a dominant color float with a non-dominant color. So, okay, I did 1, 2, 3. And now I want to pin this green yarn when I do this next stitch, even though I'm not going to do the stitch in green, right? Because I'm doing across this row. So I need to use this technique to basically hold it in place. So you go up through the front leg like you're knitting as normal. You bring the dominant yarn over the needle. Like if I were knitting this color, I would bring it under, but you bring it over and then you wrap the back, like this non-dominant color around. So it looks like this, and then you let the dominant color fall back. So you can see now this green color is twisted behind, and I complete that stitch. And now you can see the green color, the dominant color, has been pinned behind, but it's still not visible on the front. So that is a way to catch your floats, as it's called, and make sure that you don't have really, really long spans across the back of your work. So I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so I've done 3 more stitches since I last caught that float. Okay, so I just finished this repeat, right? So this is a 12-stitch repeat. It goes from 1 to 12 per this row. So I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I'm still on the first row of my work. So I'm not going to go up yet. I want the first row of my work to just be repeating this first row stretch of repeat. So I did these 12 stitches and I'm still in the first row. So now I start again at the corner here at the beginning. So I'm gonna do 3 white ones, and I will catch my float again just so that it's not super long. So remember, go as if to knit, wrap this around the opposite way, wrap it over instead of under, wrap the yarn with your non-dominant yarn as if you're going to knit, move this back, and now we've caught that float again. So 1, 2, 3, and then I have my 2 green stitches, 1, 2, and then I have my 7 again. So 1, 2, 3, catch the float, 4, 5, oops, 6, 7. Okay, so you can see we've got, this will be one cherry, this will be another cherry, and you just continue that all the way across until you get back to your beginning of the round. When you get to that, that means that you can go up to the next row. So then I would do 2. In this case, it actually is literally the exact same, but you keep going. So this number maps to the row that you're on. So let's say that I've done all of these, but I still want more length in my bag. This is also a repeat. So if I've gotten through 32 rows already, but I want to add more length, I just start right back again with the beginning of the pattern. So yeah, that is pretty much how you do that. I will also, okay, I'll also show you, let's say that I was knitting with the dominant color and I wanted to catch this non-dominant color's float. So that isn't really the case here, but I'll just pretend, like imagine this row is all in green and I'm worried I'm gonna have a really long white float. So go as if to knit, wrap this non-dominant yarn as if you're going to knit with it, wrap your dominant yarn like you're going to knit, and then unwrap the non-dominant yarn. And you'll see that just caught this float, even though the stitch is green. So I'll show you that again. So you do a couple stitches. So you wrap as if you're going to knit with this one, wrap this one too to knit, unwrap this one. And it takes a little bit of time just to kind of remember the difference of like which one do you do when you're catching which float. It becomes like, at first, honestly, I would like do it wrong every single time and have to actively remember, but it becomes sort of a more natural pattern, and eventually you just stop having to think about it as long as you get in the flow. So yeah, so that's a little bit on how to read the color chart, understand the repeats, and catch your floats, and a little bit about the color dominance. Yeah, so I hope this was helpful. Please ask any questions that you have, or if you have any suggestions on topics that I didn't cover, and happy knitting.